This webinar covers the benefits of OPC training, and it is done by the OPC Training Institute in conjunction with Novotek. With me, I have Case, who has negotiated preferential rate for all Novotek customers, and I will get to that at the end. My name is Randy Condor, and I'm the lead instructor at OPC Training Institute. Let's get going with this. In this particular presentation, we will do a very quick overview of OPC. We'll talk about how you get started with OPC and provide you with a business case for OPC training. So as we know, in the plants, we have lots and lots of different systems, as you see here. Typically, we have our three-tier network architecture, computers all over the place. And of course, there are security barriers preventing the business network users from getting into the operations network and getting into the control network, all sorts of barriers. And OPC starts to become very difficult for people to install. It's easy to put it on one computer, but when you're connecting between computers, that's when people start to have problems. Having said that, the current OPC specifications, these are the latest. We have OPC Classic, lots of different specifications there. Data access was the most popular. It's at version 3. Historical data access, second most. A very distant third was alarms and events. There are other specifications for OPC Classic, but most of these were actually not used in practice. Well, there are a handful of XML servers, but really these are not used in practice. Number one, most popular data access, historical data access, and alarms events is really what we see. Well, now there's also OPC Unified Architecture, and later on there was OPC XI as well. So what do you need to do to get started with OPC? Well, you need to learn the architecture and specifications, of course. You need to understand how to set the communication up, and you need to understand industrial communication security, and that's typically where people have the problems. You can purchase OPC products from an OPC vendor, and I want to remind you that we are vendor neutral. The training does not actually talk about products to buy. You're not going to buy software from us. Go to whatever vendor you want. This training focuses very specifically on OPC installation, not about purchasing software. And I'll talk more about that later on. And of course, once you purchase the software, you need to start putting it all together, integrating and putting them all together. Now, what are the pitfalls that people typically have? Well, the first one is the project planning, where they have the wrong architecture, trying to connect service to service, clients to clients, getting information they can't necessarily get. For example, trying to get very high-speed timestamps from connections using Modbus, not particularly good. So they have architectural failures and product capability problems. They're buying the applications that don't necessarily have the capabilities that they actually need for their project. Now, project planning is one. The second is the execution, very specifically. And what typically gets people is security when it comes to authentication and authorization. Well, they may not understand it's a security problem. What they will see is that they don't have a connection, or maybe they can't browse for OPC servers, or they can browse but they can't connect to the OPC server, or the OPC server isn't giving them automated updates, or maybe their systems seem to be very slow. So these are problems caused by typically by security. So even though the products are okay, the OPC software you're getting, the security implementation isn't working out right. Now, very common symptoms that we see out there. Number one, people who are using tunnels are typically trying to compensate for security problems. And our training shows you how to get around tunnels, how not to use tunnels, how to configure security properly. It's talking about unreliable OPC connections. Again, as I said earlier, when, for example, your connections stop and start, they work well for a day or a week or a month, and for some reason they stop, and you have to restart your applications. That's typically caused by security. Not all the time, but very often. DCOM permissions. If you see DCOM permissions for launch and activation, have a look at yours. If you see everyone or anonymous in there, that's typically a problem. Anonymous should not be there. When you see these, what it means is that anyone with with network access to your OPC server will be able to get access. They don't even need a username and password. All they need is network access, and then they'll be able to read from you, and they'll be able to write. So they can write set points. They can do whatever they want. They have complete control. You don't want to do that. So these are typical failure problems. Now, what is the problem with OPC? Why is it such a problem? Well, the biggest reason is that OPC requires a very multidisciplinary approach. Multidisciplinary meaning we have instrumentation people, IT people, information technology, we've got process control and automation people. So we've got people from a whole bunch of different backgrounds. And this is not an instrumentation thing. Yeah, you need to know the instrumentation, and that needs to be done. But that's not enough, because you need to know the IT portion, the security portion. And if you understand the IT portion, well, good for you, but you don't necessarily understand the instrumentation side. So we've got a whole bunch of disciplines that are communicating with each other. And of course, process control, automation people are really stuck in the middle. They're not quite instrumentation, they're not quite IT, and they need to get that communication working. So the first problem is that this is very multidisciplinary. And why? Because OPC touches many resources, different hardware platforms, PLCs, ECSs, PCs, so a whole bunch of different hardware platforms and different software applications that are typically very, very proprietary. And the problem is that the integrators that you hire from the outside don't necessarily understand all the issues that you have with respect to real-time or transactional systems or engineering control versus security and control. We want to make sure that we're always under control, we're safe, and we're reliable. IT is mostly concerned with making sure that people do not have unauthorized access. And often these conflict and you get the fight and people pointing at each other. So that's where there are problems. And that's why we have the certified OPC professional workshops. So there are 4 levels that we have, and I'll talk about all 4. So level one is really about OPC and DCOM. What is it? How does it work? What is it that I should be expecting? So level 1 is about OPC general. How does OPC work? What should I be looking for when everything does work? So let me just focus here on the level 1. So what is OPC? How does it work? How should it work? What should I see when everything does work? We go through troubleshooting. We also talk about concepts like bridging, like redundancy, like tunneling. When is it appropriate? When is it not? And by the way, usually it's not appropriate. What about OPC historical data access, alarms, events, OPC UA? So we talk about all the different specifications in the level 1. And the emphasis of the level 1 is getting communication to work. Now, level 1 is about getting communication to work, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's secure. So security is very important to some people, completely unimportant to others. So in the level 2, we're talking about the security model for OPC. Now, if you are interested in security, level 2 is really for you. It's really showing you how to get communication working across firewalls, different user accounts for authentication. So workgroup to workgroup communication, workgroup to domain, domain to domain, domain to workgroup. How exactly does that work? What do you need to set up? And how do we set up the authorization? And also, how do we make sure that we don't give everyone administrator permissions? Because that's also what typically happens. Everybody has administrator rights, and we don't want that. Then we talk about the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, how to implement it, the benefits, the drawbacks, what's going on with the demilitarized zone. Now, that's very important, of course, for people that are interested in security. But what if you're not interested in security? Well, it's kind of like locks and keys. If you want to understand security, you have to understand locks and keys. And of course, you can get communication out of that. But if you're not interested in security, you need to know how to unlock doors. But in order to know how to unlock doors, you need to understand locks and keys. So whether you're just interested in communication or interested in security, level 2 is actually for you. It shows you how the security model works, how to open it, and also how to close it and make it very, very secure. We can, in fact, in the level 2, we show you how to get to a setup where you've got 2 computers connected to each other. There's a minimal number of ports open only for the running OPC servers, and in the end, you can't even ping from one computer to the other. Even ping fails, and yet OPC works. You can't do file browsing, but OPC does work. A very, very neat situation. Now, the level 3 is very, very similar to level 1 and 2, but focuses specifically on OPC unified architecture. So with OPC unified architecture, well, we talk about how to get it to work and the security, but it's assuming you've already done the level 1 and 2. So now we focus only on OPC unified architecture and how to do the communication and the security very specifically using OPC unified architecture. We show how to configure the firewalls. Well, that's actually very easy with OPC UA. It's quite obvious, but we also show the security model, the certificates, accepting, rejecting certificates, a local discovery server, how that's done, how you get communication working, what kind of different security permissions there are, and again, what to do with those certificates. We talk about the different object models that there are in OPC UA. Pretty much we cover everything that's in UA, and of course, since you've already taken the level 1 and 2, we don't really have to focus that much on security, on why it needs to be done, and the methodology, why, and also the concepts. Now it's just a matter of how exactly do I do it. So in the level 3, it's about how to do the level 1 and 2, but specifically on OPC UA. Now, I see a question here, which is, well, why do I need to take level 1 and 2 if I'm only interested in OPC UA? And if that's what you're actually interested in, or if you want to take the levels out of order, that's fine. Talk to your Novotek representatives, and we can always make exceptions for people who feel that they know a lot more, that they have a lot more background than the courses. If you want to skip the prerequisites, you can. Level 4 is about OPC integration projects. Here we're talking about very large-scale OPC implementations. What happens when you have an implementation that's bigger than a single client and a single server? How do we start to monitor our entire system to make sure that it is secure? How do we compensate for hardware firewalls? So not just software firewalls, but hardware firewalls. How do we make sure that we only open up very, very specific ports instead of having thousands of ports? No. We want to have only, say, 5 or 10 open ports, and we do that with hardware firewalls. What kind of tunneling options are there with VPNs? So here you're not using specific vendor software, you're using VPNs to do this. We talk about vendor acceptance testing, factory acceptance testing, site acceptance testing. So we talk about all these different issues that occur when you have a fairly big integration project, not just project, but as you move on in your plant, you have a lot of OPC clients and servers around. And in the end, you get your certified OPC professional designation. Now, let me talk about some business cases. So the first one that we talked about is architecture. So here we talk about the different required categories. So is this for operations? In other words, if this is for operations, we're looking mostly at real-time data where we need high availability. Are we doing this for engineering? So for example, if you're doing it for engineering, analysis, financial, you don't necessarily need the real-time data. But what you really need is the reliability and to make sure the data isn't lost. And that's when we start to talk about store and forward mechanisms and so on. How do you do the data flow? Is it push? Are you pushing data? Are you pulling data? Are you doing publish and subscribe, pub sub? Is it client server? What are the different architectural issues? And how do we work with communication loss with respect to redundancy? Again, getting at data availability or store and forward when we're talking about data integrity or reliability, or maybe you need both of those. And what are the circumstances for OPC tunneling? And more importantly, what are the circumstances when you don't need OPC tunneling? So a lot of the course focuses on how to get away from having to purchase software products from different vendors. Rather, what you want to be able to do is configure your system properly in the first place. Number 2, the implementation. In other words, putting all of this stuff together. Here we're talking about enabling you to reduce your implementation time and ensuring that your project is actually a success. The workshop itself focuses on getting you out of the class and into work and working immediately. Everything we do is about practicality. So it's very, very, very practical. So we show you how to get the communication working very, very quickly. How to set up DCOM. How do you get it right the first time? How do you configure your firewall? How do you configure your authentication and authorization in a way that allows communication and is also very secure? So here we're talking about making sure that the communication is reliable and very secure. And then we show you how to troubleshoot a bunch of different communication issues. In fact, you fix, we break. So really what's going on here is you get communication working, then we start to break. It's slowly at first. So at first you're breaking, you're seeing what you're doing, kind of approaches like physicians, in the sense that we break something, see how the software behaves, see what happens, and see what the errors are. Once you start to understand what's going on, then we start to break it for you. You don't know what's going on, so you have to fix it. It's quite cool. And then you learn how to implement OPC best practices and avoid the common problems that people have. Also, security. Again, you want to provide the plants with security, but really you also want to make it very, very reliable, and you actually want to make sure that you have communication. This is what we're talking about here. How do we provide security and control? So we talk about how to apply Windows security. We talk about it and we actually do it. And also how to protect yourself from unauthorized access. And again, I remind you, most integrators, and you'll see this in your DCOM config, you'll see access for everyone or anonymous. People are just following white papers that they download from the internet just to get communication working, but it's not secure. So how do we make sure that we have availability and that our data is protected? We're talking about configuring the firewall, both software firewalls, for example, the Windows firewall, and hardware firewalls. If you got your Cisco firewalls or whatever hardware firewalls, we talk about exactly how to get this set up, and we do it. So we actually do an example with this. So you actually restrict DCOM for specific applications or very specific ports, so that in the end, you can work with engineering and with IT to set up a demilitarized zone, and you can comply with whatever regulations there are for your industry. Now, as I said, OPC is really an interdisciplinary field. Here, if you come from an IT background, you learn the automation requirements and restrictions, or the instrumentation. What is it that they're looking for? Why don't they like it when we say, well, just reboot your PLC? It doesn't work. What is it that they're looking for? So IT is learning the automation lingo. Also, the automation or instrumentation learns the IT requirements. IT very, very often complains that automation just wants communication and they leave everything open. Whereas automation typically complains that IT just wants to close everything for them and not allow communication. So the finger pointing game starts, and there's a gap between automation, between engineering and IT. So we talk about the result of what we talk about bridges it. It closes that gap. And so you can start to get your work done without all the conflicts and the finger pointing and the yelling. Of course, you get your certification. So you get your COP, Certified OPC Professional designation, which hopefully differentiates you from other people, ensures that you actually know what's going on, and you can start to look for that with your integrators. All right. Last part here, vendor neutrality. There is no conflict between the training, the trainers, OPC Training Institute, and the students. So we're not trying to tell you, buy this software. In fact, we show you software from different vendors. We use Kepware, we use Iconics, we use software from OPC Systems, we use software from Cogent, all of which I noticed earlier that Novotek is actually reselling these as well. So there is no conflict with the students. So we're not here to say you buy this. We're not here to say this vendor is better than that vendor. That's not the intent. The intent is to show you what happens with applications as you connect, as you make connections, as they break, how do they behave, what is common for everybody, what is different. That's what it's really about. We are providing training on OPC technology. So that is what the course is about. It is not about selling you software. And OPC TI will not call you after the training and say, hey, are you ready to buy some software? That is not what we do. The training classes itself, the format, it's quite fast paced. So if you're here to if you want to just sit back and relax, this isn't the class for you. It's very, very fast paced. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I've heard it say students get 2 computers. So each student receives 2 computers that you control. These are not scripted computers, by the way. These are real computers that you actually control. You configure them yourself, you troubleshoot problems, and of course since you have 2 computers, you've got a client computer, a server computer, so you can connect in between them, but you also connect to other students because there are other students in the class. It makes it quite interesting. The connections, you get them working and then we sabotage them, we break them. So you fix it, and then we break it. And then you have to see how to fix it, how to break it. And we provide you a structured approach to OPC troubleshooting, to diagnosing problems, a very structured approach that you can follow. And when we do the exercises, you keep following these steps time after time after time until they're ingrained. You start to understand what exactly is happening here. So that when you get back to the plant, you have a much easier time troubleshooting your connection problems. Now, it's a live instructor. Nothing is recorded. Now, whether you're local or remote. So obviously, right now with COVID, the local classes are not really happening. That's okay. Those are with a live instructor. Of course, there's a person in front of you. But the remote classes, which we've been doing for the past 10 years or so, have been going very, very, very well. So again, it's a live instructor. There is nothing recorded. The format itself is very much like this webinar, except it's live, it's not recorded. You see the slides just like you see here. You can ask questions. Not just writing them down. You can actually ask them with audio. You're connected by phone or by VoIP, whatever. And you see the presentation, and you also again get the 2 computers, so you get access to them. Very, very similar to remote desktop. These are your computers for the class. You can do whatever you want to them. Again, they're not scripted. So we've got these local classes and also remote classes. And you can talk to your Novotek representative in your respective country about that. Now, the courses teach, again, about OPC and its specific application, and it is really about reducing your costs, both short-term and long-term. The training, we hope that you see that it will save you a lot of time and money. It does not take a week to get communication working. It only takes a few minutes to get communication working once you understand what's going on. And again, I want to remind you, this is completely vendor neutral, and salespeople will not, OPCTI salespeople anyway, will not contact you after the class to buy software. That is not what it's about. One last slide here. This is from, if you want more information, come to opcti.com, www.opcti.com. We have a whole bunch of white papers and videos and product reviews and tips for you for how to get over communication problems. Come to one of our hands-on workshops, either in person, which I guess will start up after COVID, or remote, and you can earn your certified OPC professional. Folks, OPC professional designation, I mean. All right, so everybody, I hope you found this useful. please look us up, opcti.com, or contact your Novotek representative at novotek.com. And these guys will help you out. Oh, as I said, for pricing, I see a question here for pricing. So our regular classes are about 2,000 euros per class. That's the, and you can go to our website and take a look at them, each one of the levels. But we've negotiated preferential pricing with Novotek. So just contact your Novotek representative, and they will tell you exactly what's available for you, especially if you take the accelerated class, which, by the way, I see another question here on the accelerated class. The classes are usually 2 days each. So you can take level 1 for 2 days, level 2 for 2 days, 3 and 4. So it's a total of 8 days. But if you take them all in one shot, we have what's called the accelerated class, where instead of taking 8 days, we take 5 days, so a week. And we take that week. And now, since there is no time in between level 1, level 2, you're not spending months in between just resting and forgetting material. We don't have to review, and we can do this very, very quickly. I see another question here on the timing. So what is the time zone? So depending on where you are, we offer classes in different time zones. So we've got instructors that are in different time zones, in European time zones. So Central European time, in the American time zone, and in Asian time zone. So, wherever people are. And so we do these during your workday. Now, if you are one of those people that, well, I'm really busy at the plant, the only time I have is in the evening, that's okay too. For example, if you're in Europe and you want to do this in the evening, that's perfectly fine. Just jump onto one of our North American classes where they are happening during the evening. So you can see our schedule at www.opcti.com. Again, folks, thank you very much for attending. Looks like we're out of time. And hopefully we'll see you at another webinar, or even better, at one of our hands-on classes. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.